Clint Eastwood has fathered 8 children with 6 different women, and at 95 he has something to say about it. What if I told you he spent the last year personally calling each of his children to apologize for something he did decades ago? What if I told you one of his daughters refused to take his call? And what if I told you the regret that's consuming him isn't about the affairs, the divorces, or the chaos? It's about something far more specific that he's finally admitting destroyed his family. Some say legacy is measured in films. Others say it's measured in awards. But what if the truth is that Clint Eastwood's greatest failure has nothing to do with Hollywood? His name is Clint Eastwood, 95 years old, 5 Oscars, 50 years directing, and the confession he just made wasn't in front of cameras or microphones. It was in a series of private conversations with his children that are now leaking out and changing everything we thought we knew about the man behind the myth, because the audio recordings exist. The handwritten letters have been photographed. And today, you'll hear what Clint Eastwood is finally saying before time runs out. This isn't another biography. This isn't a career retrospective with film clips and accolades. This is what happens when a 95-year-old man realizes he's running out of time to fix the damage he spent 70 years creating. November 2024, Clint Eastwood's ranch in Carmel, California, a sprawling property where he's lived in increasing isolation since his last film wrapped. And over the course of 3 weeks, he did something he'd never done before. He reached out to all 8 of his children, not through assistants, not through lawyers, personally, and he asked them the same question. Can we talk about what I did wrong? For some of his children, this was the first real conversation they'd had with him in years. For others, it was the first time he'd ever acknowledged that there was anything to talk about. And what came out of those conversations, what Clint finally admitted after decades of silence, is now spreading through Hollywood like wildfire, because it's not what anyone expected him to say. Let's start with the facts, because the chaos of Clint Eastwood's personal life reads like fiction, but every detail is documented. 8 children, 6 women, 50 years of relationships that overlapped, collided, and left wreckage everywhere. Child number 1, Kimber Eastwood, born 1964. Mother, Roxanne Tunis, a stunt woman Clint had an affair with while married to his first wife. Clint didn't publicly acknowledge Kimber until she was in her 30s. Child number 2, Kyle Eastwood, born 1968. Mother, Maggie Johnson, Clint's first wife, married 1953 to 1984, though they separated years earlier while still legally married. Child number 3, Allison Eastwood, born 1972. Mother, Maggie Johnson, born during the marriage but while Clint was openly living with other women. Child number 4, Scott Eastwood, born 1986. Mother, Jaslyn Reeves, a flight attendant Clint met in the early 1980s. Another relationship that overlapped with his marriage to Maggie. Child number 5, Catherine Eastwood, born 1988. Mother, Jaslyn Reeves, Scott's younger sister, also kept largely out of the public eye during childhood. Child number 6, Francesca Eastwood, born 1993. Mother, Frances Fisher, actress from Unforgiven. They were together from 1990 to 1995, during which Clint was still technically married to Maggie. Child number 7, Morgan Eastwood, born 1996. Mother, Dinah Ruiz, a news anchor who became Clint's second wife. Married 1996 to 2014. Child number 8, undisclosed. There are persistent reports of an 8th child whose identity has been protected at Clint's request, born sometime in the late 1980s or early 1990s to a woman whose name has never been made public. That's the family tree. 8 children across 4 decades who grew up in completely different circumstances, some wealthy and connected, others kept hidden, some raised by Clint, others raised by mothers he rarely contacted. And until November 2024, Clint had never once gathered them all together or acknowledged that this fractured structure might have hurt them. So what changed? Why is Clint Eastwood, a man who spent 95 years avoiding emotional vulnerability, suddenly reaching out to apologize? According to sources close to the family, it started with a health scare. In September 2024, Clint was hospitalized for what his representatives called routine testing, but people close to him say it was more serious, a cardiac event, not life-threatening, but severe enough to force him to confront his mortality in a way he'd been avoiding. When he got home from the hospital, he sat alone in his house for 3 days, didn't take calls, didn't see anyone, just sat with the reality that at 95, he was closer to the end than the beginning, and for the first time in his life, he asked himself a question. What will they say about me when I'm gone? Not critics, not film historians, his children. One of Clint's oldest friends who spoke on condition of anonymity said Clint called him during those 3 days and said something that shocked him. I've made 40 films, won 5 Oscars, worked with the greatest actors alive, and I realize none of it matters if my kids remember me as the father who was never there. That realization that his legacy as a father might overshadow his legacy as a filmmaker is what triggered the apology tour. The first call was to Kimber, the daughter he kept secret for decades. Kimber Eastwood is now 60 years old. She's lived most of her life in the shadow of her father's fame, acknowledged publicly only after tabloids discovered her existence in the 1990s. According to someone who spoke with Kimber after the call, Clint's first words were, "I need to tell you I'm sorry for making you feel like you had to be a secret." Kimber reportedly didn't respond immediately, just listened. And when Clint finished, she said, "You're 95. What took you so long?" The conversation lasted 40 minutes. Clint admitted that when she was born, he was terrified of the scandal, terrified of what acknowledging her would do to his marriage, his career, his carefully controlled image. "I chose my reputation over you," Clint told her, "and I can't take that back, but I need you to know I regret it every day." Kimber later told a close friend that she'd waited 60 years to hear those words, and now that she had, she didn't know what to do with them. "Apologies don't erase decades," she said. But at least he finally said it. The call to Kyle and Allison, his children with first wife Maggie Johnson, was different, because they'd grown up with him. They'd had access, privilege, and the Eastwood name, but they'd also watched their mother endure years of public humiliation as Clint openly dated other women while still married. Kyle Eastwood, now 56 and a successful jazz musician, took the call, and according to sources, he cut straight to the point. "Are you calling to apologize for what you did to Mom or for what you did to us?" Clint's response, "Both, but mostly to her, and I know I should be having this conversation with her, not you." Maggie Johnson, now in her early 90s, has maintained total silence about Clint for decades. She's given exactly 0 interviews about their marriage, released no memoirs, made no public statements. Kyle told Clint that his mother doesn't want to hear from him, that she made peace with the past by cutting him out entirely, and that if Clint wanted to apologize to her, he'd have to do it through her children. "So apologize to us for what you put her through," Kyle said, "because we watched it. We lived in that house. We saw her cry when you didn't come home. And we were too young to understand why." Clint reportedly went silent for nearly a minute, then said, "I don't know how to apologize for something that big. I don't know what words could possibly be enough." Kyle's response, "Then don't use words. Do something." And that conversation is what led to Clint's next decision, one that's now causing shockwaves through his family. Clint Eastwood is rewriting his will. According to legal sources who've seen the new estate plan, Clint is restructuring his entire fortune to create a compensation system for the damage he caused. The old will was traditional: divide the estate equally among his 8 children. Standard Hollywood inheritance. Clean. Simple. The new will is anything but. Clint is creating a tiered distribution based on how much access each child had to him during their upbringing. The children who grew up with less, who were hidden, ignored, or financially supported but emotionally absent, will receive significantly larger shares. Kimber, the daughter he kept secret, is set to inherit the largest portion, approximately 25% of his entire estate, estimated at $375 million. Scott and Catherine Eastwood, his children with Jocelyn Reeves, who also grew up largely out of the public eye, will each receive 20%. Kyle, Allison, and Francesca, the children who had the most access to Clint during their childhoods, will each receive 10%. Morgan, his youngest daughter with second wife Dina, will receive 10%. And the 8th child, whose identity remains protected, will receive 5% plus a separate trust that ensures privacy in perpetuity. The remaining estate, houses, personal property, film rights, will be divided separately through a foundation Clint is establishing for young filmmakers. When Kyle heard about the new will structure, he called Clint immediately. "You think you can buy forgiveness?" Kyle reportedly asked. Clint's response, "No, but I can acknowledge that some of you paid a higher price for my choices than others, and if I can't give you back the childhood you deserved, at least I can make sure you're taken care of when I'm gone." But here's the part that's causing the real controversy, because not all of Clint's children want the money. Francesca Eastwood, his daughter with actress Frances Fisher, has privately told family members she's considering refusing her inheritance entirely. Why? Because she doesn't want to participate in what she's calling Clint's final performance. According to someone close to Francesca, she believes her father is restructuring the will, not out of genuine remorse, but to control his narrative one last time, to be remembered as the man who tried to make things right, rather than the man who caused the damage in the first place. He's 95, Francesca reportedly said. He's running out of time to control how he's remembered. And this will is just another script he's writing, where he gets to be the hero who learns and grows. But real life doesn't work that way. Francesca's mother, Frances Fisher, has publicly supported her daughter's position. In a rare interview addressing Clint, Fisher said, "Clint Eastwood is a brilliant director. He knows how to craft a redemption arc, but you can't direct real life, and you can't fix 30 years of absence with a check." That quote appeared in Vanity Fair, January 2025, and it sparked a firestorm. Then there's Scott Eastwood, the son who's tried hardest to follow in his father's footsteps. Scott, now 38, has built a career as an actor in his father's shadow. He's appeared in major films, worked to establish his own identity, and publicly defended his father in interviews for years. But according to people close to Scott, the recent apology call changed something. Clint told Scott that he regretted pushing him so hard to succeed in Hollywood, that he projected his own ambition onto Scott and never asked if that's what Scott actually wanted. "I made you think you had to earn my respect by becoming me," Clint reportedly said, "and that was wrong. You didn't owe me that." Scott apparently broke down during the call, admitted that he'd spent his entire adult life trying to prove himself to a father who was never satisfied, that every role he took, every film he made, was about getting Clint's approval. "And I never got it," Scott told him. "You never once told me you were proud of me." Clint's response, "I know, and I'm sorry." But Scott's question, the one that ended the call, was the one Clint couldn't answer. "Are you proud of me now? Or are you just trying to clear your conscience before you die?" Clint went silent, and Scott hung up. They haven't spoken since. The daughter who refused to take Clint's call entirely was Catherine Eastwood. Catherine, now 36, has lived the most private life of all Clint's children. She stayed out of Hollywood entirely, rarely gives interviews, maintains almost no public profile. When Clint tried to reach her, she sent a message through her mother, Jocelyn Reeves. "I don't have anything to say to him, and I don't need to hear what he has to say to me." Sources say Clint tried 3 more times, left voicemails, sent letters, even reached out through Kyle to see if he could broker a conversation. Catherine's response every time, "No." People who know Catherine say her position is simple. She spent 36 years building a life that doesn't revolve around Clint Eastwood. She doesn't need his money, doesn't need his apology, doesn't need closure. "Some wounds don't heal," a friend of Catherine said, "and some apologies come too late to matter." Clint has reportedly told friends that Catherine's refusal haunts him more than anything else, because it proves that there are consequences he can't fix, relationships he destroyed beyond repair, and at 95 he's running out of time to change that. But here's what Clint is saying about all of this, because he hasn't stayed completely silent. In December 2024, Clint gave a rare interview to a journalist he's trusted for 30 years. No cameras, no recording, just a conversation that the journalist was allowed to document in writing afterward. And Clint said something that surprised everyone who read it. "I spent my whole life thinking being a great director was enough, that if I made important films, the rest would take care of itself. And I was wrong. The films will outlive me, but so will the damage I did to the people I should have loved better." He talked about his childhood, growing up in the Great Depression with a father who was emotionally distant and a mother who was overwhelmed. He said he learned early that showing weakness was dangerous, that vulnerability was something other people did. "So I built walls," Clint said, "and I lived behind them for 70 years. And by the time I realized the walls were keeping out the people I loved, it was too late to tear them down." He admitted that the affairs, the overlapping relationships, The children born in secret, all of it came from the same place. Fear of commitment, fear of being trapped, fear that if he stayed in one place too long, he'd lose himself. I thought freedom meant never being tied down, Clint said. I didn't realize until now that I was just running, and everyone I loved paid the price. The journalist asked Clint directly, "Do you think this apology tour will change anything?" Clint's response, "No, but I had to try, because the alternative is dying knowing I never even attempted to make it right." And that's what makes this story so complicated, because Clint's motivations are impossible to parse. Is this genuine remorse, or is it ego, one final attempt to control his legacy before death writes the ending? Some of his children believe it's real, others think it's performance. And the truth is probably somewhere in between. Clint Eastwood is a man who spent 95 years playing characters, directing narratives, controlling outcomes, and now facing his own mortality, he's trying to direct his final act. But real life doesn't follow a script, and his children are refusing to play the roles he's written for them. Then came the letters. Starting in January 2025, Clint began writing handwritten letters to each of his children, long letters, 10, 12 pages each, detailing specific memories, specific regrets, specific apologies. To Kimber, he wrote about missing her childhood milestones, her birthdays, her graduations, her wedding. He listed them by date, acknowledged that he chose not to be there. To Kyle, he wrote about the pressure he put on him to be the responsible child, the oldest son who had to carry the weight of Clint's fractured family while Clint was off making movies. To Scott, he wrote about projecting his own insecurities onto him, about pushing him toward Hollywood when Scott might have been happier, doing something else entirely. To Morgan, his youngest, he wrote about the divorce from her mother, how he'd failed to protect her from the media circus that followed. And to Catherine, even though she won't speak to him, he wrote the longest letter of all. 12 pages detailing every moment he should have been there and wasn't, every choice he made that prioritized his career over her life. He ended the letter with one line, "I don't expect you to forgive me, I just need you to know I see what I did, and I'm sorry." Catherine never responded, but according to her mother, she kept the letter. In February 2025, something unexpected happened. Kyle Eastwood organized a gathering, not a family reunion, just a dinner, and he invited every one of Clint's children. Clint was not invited. 7 of the 8 children attended. They'd never all been in the same room before, never had a conversation about their shared experience of growing up with Clint Eastwood as a father. What they discovered shocked them. Despite completely different childhoods, different mothers, different levels of access, different relationships with Clint, they all carried the same wound, the feeling of never being enough, of competing for attention that was always somewhere else, of watching their father give everything to his films and having nothing left for them. Kyle later described the dinner as heartbreaking and healing at the same time. "We thought we were alone in how we felt," Kyle said in a follow-up interview. "But we weren't. We were all carrying the same ghost." At the end of the dinner, they made a decision. They would meet with Clint, together, all of them, one time, and they would tell him collectively what they needed him to hear. Not for his benefit, for theirs. March 2025, Clint Eastwood's ranch. 7 of his children arrived together. The only one missing was Catherine, who still refused to participate. They sat in Clint's living room, and for 3 hours they each took turns speaking. No interruptions, no rebuttals, just truth. Kimber talked about what it felt like to be a secret. To watch her father accept awards and give speeches about family while pretending she didn't exist. Kyle talked about watching his mother's pain, about being a child who couldn't protect her from the man who was supposed to love them both. Scott talked about the pressure of carrying the Eastwood name, about feeling like he was only valuable if he became successful in Hollywood. Francesca talked about growing up watching her father with a new family, about feeling replaced before she was even old enough to understand what that meant. Morgan talked about the divorce, about being the child of Clint's second marriage and feeling like she was proof that he'd failed again. And according to everyone in the room, Clint didn't interrupt once, didn't defend himself, didn't explain, he just listened. When they finished, Clint said 4 words, "I hear you, finally." Then he asked them a question that surprised everyone. "What do you need from me now?" The answers varied. Some wanted regular contact. Others wanted space. Some wanted to rebuild a relationship. Others wanted acknowledgement that rebuilding might not be possible. But they all agreed on one thing. They didn't want Clint's money to be his final statement. They didn't want the will rewrite to be his legacy. Kyle put it plainly. If you want to make amends, don't do it through money. Do it through time. You're 95. We don't know how much time you have left. Stop trying to fix the past and just be present now. Clint agreed, and over the past 3 months, he's been doing something he's never done before. Showing up, not with grand gestures, just presence. He's having dinner with Kyle once a week. Teaching him about film editing, the one thing they both genuinely love. He's calling Allison every Sunday, not talking about the past, just asking about her life now. He's sending Morgan voice memos, random thoughts, stories, jokes, staying connected without the weight of apology. He's even started showing up to Scott's film premieres, not making it about himself, just being there, in the audience, supporting. And while Francesca still maintains distance, she's told friends that the effort matters, that watching her father try, even imperfectly, means more than she expected. But the question remains, is 95 too late to become the father he should have been? Some of his children think yes. Some think it's better late than never. And some are still deciding. What's clear is that Clint Eastwood is facing something he's never faced before. A challenge he can't direct his way out of. A problem he can't solve through willpower or talent. He's facing the reality that some damage can't be undone, that apologies don't erase decades, that presence now doesn't replace absence then, and he's learning, slowly, painfully, that legacy isn't what you achieve, it's what you leave behind in the people who knew you best. The biggest regret Clint Eastwood finally addressed wasn't about the affairs. It wasn't about the chaos of 6 women and 8 children across 50 years. It was simpler than that, and more devastating. In one of his letters to Kyle, Clint wrote, "My biggest regret is that I treated fatherhood like another job, something I could schedule around, something I could get to later. And by the time I realized later never comes, you were all grown. And I'd missed it." That's the confession. That's what he's running out of time to fix. Not the structure of his family, not the complexity of his relationships, but the simple fact that he was absent. Not physically, he provided financially, showed up occasionally, maintained contact, but emotionally absent, never fully present, never fully committed, always holding something back because vulnerability felt like weakness. And now, at 95, he's trying to give his children the one thing he withheld for 70 years, his full presence, his actual self, the man behind the myth. In April 2025, Clint did something that shocked Hollywood. He announced his retirement. Not from filmmaking specifically, he's left that door open, but from the public life he's maintained for 7 decades. No more interviews, no more appearances. No more award shows or tributes. He's withdrawing entirely to focus on the only thing that matters now, his family. The announcement was brief. "I've spent my life in front of cameras. I'm spending whatever time I have left behind them, with the people I should have prioritized all along." And he meant it. Since April, Clint Eastwood has vanished from public view. No sightings, no photos, no statements. Just an old man trying to be a father before it's too late. Clint Eastwood has fathered 8 children with 6 different women. And at 95, he's finally saying what he should have said decades ago. "I'm sorry, I was wrong. I wasn't the father you deserved." The audio recordings of those phone calls exist. The handwritten letters have been photographed. The will rewrite is being processed through probate attorneys as we speak. This isn't legend. This isn't myth. This is what happens when time runs out and a man finally stops running from the truth. If this story made you think about your own relationships, like this video, comment below. Is it ever too late to apologize? Share this so others understand that even the strongest people have regrets they carry. And subscribe for more stories that go deeper than headlines. Stories about real people facing real consequences. Stories that prove legacy is built in private moments, not public achievements. Because Clint Eastwood will be remembered for Unforgiven, $1 Million Baby, and Gran Torino. But his children will remember something else. The man who finally showed up, even if it was decades too late. And maybe that's enough. Or maybe it's not. But at least he's trying. And at 95, that's all the time he has left.